do that. And by the way, we're now live. Polygon Issuance number 93. What day is today? I don't know what today is.
Friday.
February 5th, 2016. It's a Friday. Typically we do these on Friday, but we haven't been doing them on Friday of late. So, and Jeff Wilcox here hosting, and I'm the only one that's not on camera because, as always, I turn my camera on and my lighting is terrible. So we turn it back off. But with us today, besides our main guest, we have Matt Scheiss, who's in Marion, who's loving his concrete, and he only had to take about 1.5 inches of snow off his driveway a couple of days ago when we had our big blizzard. So, Matt, is there anything else you want to say before we introduce the person that's in the middle of us?
Glad to be here. I literally just got home from work like 5 minutes ago. We had a full day of pouring a parking lot of a gas station, so that was nice and chilly. Was not a whole lot of fun, but we got through it and we got it done, so here I am.
And hopefully it's covered, because otherwise it'll crack.
Yes, we have blankets and ground thaw heaters and all kinds of fun stuff.
Yeah, concrete pouring in winter, not good. I'm hoping they're not doing the Collins Road bypass this time of the year, paving it. But Sean, our guest, would be like, he doesn't know what that is. So anyway, we'll skip ahead to that, or to whatever. But Sean Sublette, if I said it right, hopefully I did.
That's close enough.
Yeah, Sean.
Yeah, I kind of go by that.
Yeah, the bald guy, the old man, as he said.
Maybe one day I'll grow up to be James Spann.
Yeah, we'll see. You might be maybe a few years younger than him, but anyway.
Oh yeah.
So Sean is only like 30. Anyway, so
See,
Sean.
folks, that's what happens when you don't sleep.
Yeah.
Right there. Right there.
Yeah. Sean was in
He's
television
19.
for a long time, and that's why he lost his hair.
That's part of the reason.
Yeah, he was in TV too long, in the Roanoke Lynchburg market. Right, that was where you spent most of your time, Sean. Right?
That's all of it. I did it 19 years, and it was entirely in that market. 2 stations in that market. First 8 years at the NBC affiliate, and then the last 11 at the ABC affiliate. But very few meteorologists will spend their entire career in one market. Again, I only had a 19-year career, but that was the only market I was in.
But then, of course, the Roanoke Lynchburg market is, I think, what, number 67 now?
67, 8. It kind of jumps back and forth.
Jumps back and forth. So it would be comparable, be slightly bigger than Des Moines, or slightly bigger than, gosh, what? Oh, I know it's bigger than Omaha. It's in that range. It's in the upper. It's in the medium category, pretty much.
Yeah, I call it a medium market.
Unlike,
I think that's fair.
Unlike where Matt and I live, we're in DMA 90. So we're like in the medium to small medium market. So
That's still 2 digits.
Yeah, so I digress. We've gone on DMA brains and Polygon for that time. But so Sean right now, he's no longer in television because he lost all his hair. So he had to find something else to do. So he decided to be a meteorologist at Climate Central, which is in Princeton, New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
And he's been there for a few years now, 2 or 3.
No, just about a year. About
a year. So he hasn't grown back his hair yet because of Climate Central. So.
Yeah, it's not coming back, baby.
Yeah, he hasn't tried Rogaine yet. And if he did, it'd probably still be gray from his 19 years in TV. So we're going to discuss with him. This is the reason I sent the email, was the winter storm. That was like 3 winter storms ago. The winter storm that went across the east a few weeks ago, that dumped quite a bit of snow across places like Virginia, West Virginia, Maryland, up into Pennsylvania. And then
it snowed all the way in Nashville, Tennessee at the beginning.
Yeah, it went into the south as well. But what I was getting on was, and I said this in Sean's email, that with climate change, or global warming, it's more or less, most people have changed it from global warming to climate change, because some places are not warming as fast as others, and So climate change seems to be a more uniform thing, I would say. Because I think there is climate change, whether it's cooling, warming, we'll see. But my thing is, I see climate change when I see flowers starting to bloom in January. I think there's a problem. Because, and I'll say this before we get into the meat of the discussion, the thing I'm a co-owner of, the Iowa Weather Network, we have a what do we call it? A garden person. He works at a garden center, and he's a horticulturist. I'll get it right. He has flowers that were blooming right before the snowstorm. They're the first, like the snowdrops. They typically are the first ones to bloom. They typically bloom, I think, in late February. They were blooming the last week of January. I have actually seen tulips starting to poke up in January before, years ago. They didn't make it because then we had a big freeze in February through like April.
And really, that's one of the climate change issues, is that you do have this early season warming, but you will still have these cold snaps. So you're going to introduce more opportunities for your plants and or fruits and vegetables or whatever to struggle through the season, because you have this abnormal warming early on, but you're still susceptible to these frosts. So there's a long, or freezes, so there's a longer period of damage before you reach that time of last potential frost or freeze.
Yeah, and that's especially too when I've seen is that these flowers are coming up, even if it's only like 35, 36, 37, which is not that much warmer than our average temperature, especially now. I think our average is around 30. But 37, 38 over a couple of days, the snow all melts, the flower sinks at spring, and they come up, and then boom, here comes cold air, and it's 10, and then they're struggling. And
yeah, because that's the other thing. When you actually have snowpack on the ground, it's a very good insulator. I mean, so that the ground beneath it won't get much below freezing, as opposed to, everything melts off. Then you have this big Arctic outbreak. It gets down to 5 or 10 degrees, so your soils are more exposed. So that also introduces a thing into the equation as well.
Yeah, and what I've mentioned with this snowstorm that went through the east about a week and a half ago, I think it was, that is climate change going to cause more of these storms to occur when a lot of people are saying we're going to get less snow, but all you have to do is get a big storm out in the warm Atlantic, and you just get even the littlest bit of cold air. You may see more storms like this, but maybe not as often, but they're a lot worse.
And that's really the paradox about the whole thing, is in the mean you will tend to have less snow from season to season, but you will have a few more of these outlier extreme events, because these times when you do have the temperature low enough for snow, it may be closer to that sweet spot where you have the best crystalline growth, which is about 0 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit. So maybe you had a system that might have been generating snow and it was -5 to 0 up at cloud base level or above in the cloud level. And now all of a sudden it's a 5, 10 degree snow instead of a -5 to 0. So now you've got higher saturation vapor pressure, which means you've got more evaporation, which means you have more condensation and thusly more snow. And as you also alluded to, in addition to just the baroclinic instability that drives most of these winter storms, there is that diabatic component from the warmer water of the Atlantic and just offshore the Atlantic. And I don't know the precise number off the top of my head, but I think it's warmer than it's been in the last 30 or 35 years. Now, if you want to attribute that to climate change, that's still a little bit dicey. We want to see a little more of a trend. But unquestionably, that water was warmer. So these kinds of things are still going to happen. One of the things that I do worry about, as you alluded to, Jeff, is there's an element saying, oh, you said it was never going to snow again. I'm like, no, that's not what we said. We said it's not going to snow as much. Doesn't mean it's going to stop. In fact, we're going to be issuing a report next week that shows that if you look at the whole season of snow as kind of a bell curve, peaking at middle of the winter and then kind of backing off as you get to spring, there seems to be a tendency nationwide that is shrinking. So you're going to have even fewer snow events on the outliers. In other words, you're going to lose these November snows. You're going to start losing more of these March snows, and everything is going to be more concentrated in January and February. And that's a national trend. It's not going to work that way for every single solitary spot because the planet doesn't work that way. One of the things we have seen is this kind of contraction of the season, and I think that's going to be the thing people notice. It's still going to be cold in January, but it won't be as cold. It'll still be cold enough to support snow, just not as often. Yeah. So, and they're already seeing that up in Alaska. I mean, one of the things with climate change that for me is big evidence, because people like to talk all different ways about this. When you look at what's happening to the permafrost in Alaska, that's permafrost, and that's melting, and it's melting enough where that structures that have been built into that permafrost are failing because the ground is melting where it's never melted before. So you have all these buildings that are kind of doing this because the ground is melting beneath them, and they weren't engineered for it. In fact, I was reading a paper a year or two ago about these things called thermosiphons, which they put into the ground to keep the temperature lower. And I don't remember exactly how they work, but again, they're trying to reverse engineer what they're doing. I mean, what the climate is doing. So those are the things that are most troubling in terms of the most obvious evidence. And we can talk about this satellite, or we can talk about this thermometer and this spot all we want, but the glaciers in the mean are retreating. The permafrost is melting. You don't have as much Arctic ice anymore. I mean, it's the old ice that's melting away. There's always ice every winter up there. But the ice that's the multi-year ice, the stuff that's 4 and 5 years old, is melting away. So you're getting more and more 1-year ice up there, and less of the 4, 5, and 6-year-old ice up there. And so these are the things that you've got to look at, which kind of make me a little disappointed in some of my colleagues who just aren't quite in tune with this yet. They're looking for reasons to dismiss everything because they find 1 or 2 little nuggets. And 1 or 2 little nuggets doesn't eliminate something when you have multiple lines of evidence from multiple different directions. And that's a little frustrating, to be sure. But we think that the tide is starting to turn slowly and gradually. It's like turning around a semi. You're not going to do it in a day or a week. It takes a long time to change attitudes, but we think there is some sign of that.
Sean, I have a question. I'm kind of a close follower, or I guess my way of thinking when it comes to terms of climate change and everything. I'm a close follower of James Spann's thinking. I don't like talking about it, even amongst friends that aren't.
It's no fun to talk about at all.
Weather nerds.
It's no fun to talk about at all.
Yeah. There are some people that have a really large, I don't know what the right term is, they're very divisive when it comes to that subject. Either they hate you because you don't think it's anthropogenic, or they don't care at all and screw you for even thinking of that or something else. But there's very, very sharp lines of division.
Yep.
I would liken it to skirmish lines in a military battle. They're very hard. They're very well laid out, and you can see the dividing lines very easily. With all this context of what's going on with this storm, with the storms that we've seen this year, and past storms and storms that are coming in the future, what would be the best way? In your opinion, what would be the best way of pushing that understanding even further, if that makes any sense?
No, it makes a lot of sense, and excuse me, fight off a little cold here. It depends on the audience. I met James 3 or 4 years ago. Spent most of a weekend with him. At a big All Britain weather summit. We work for the same company, just in different parts of the country. And this was right after the 2011, I see right after, a few months after the 2011 outbreak. And you could tell James is much more concerned about short term. He is more concerned about saving lives in the short term. I mean, that's what drives him. He wants to save people's lives. I mean, the guy was nearly in tears when we were talking about, you know, more than 300 people died in that outbreak. And he said, that's not supposed to happen, not in this day and age. And he said he felt guilty because he didn't save enough people's lives. I said, James, there's no telling how many people's lives you saved, but he didn't want to talk about it. I mean, he was that messed up and that distraught over it. So he's largely quiet on it because he knows that it doesn't follow the mainstream science. You know, where the National Science Foundation is, where the national academies are, where the AMS is, where any of the scientific organizations around the world. One of the things that I've tended to notice in the last 6 to 12 months, and that's just James, because I like James, what he does for short-term weather is immeasurable. Would I like to maybe talk a little bit more about it? Sure. Am I going to pester him about it? No, I'm not. But one of the things I see pushback the most is when there is an extreme event and that you do have the climate change hawks jumping on the extreme weather events. Now, the reason for that is, one, there is some valid science to that. The attribution of one event is still very hedgy. But that's something that my organization is actually working on in terms of attributing an event to climate change. But it's not a binary yes or no, and that's the problem with the media. They want a yes or no answer. It's a soundbite culture. They want a yes or no, and everybody gets caught up in that. Whereas we could say, you know, it was about 10 times more likely that this particular heat wave occurred in Australia, given the atmosphere that we have now. Or this particular heavy rain event in Great Britain was probably about 20% stronger. So it's not to say that this storm happened because of climate change. Well, maybe instead of a 10-inch storm, you got a 14-inch storm. You know, and that's the nuance that gets lost. And I think when you see the operational meteorologists who really aren't quite on board yet, they hear that, and they hear the climate change people are jumping on this because the weather was bad. Well, that's the time, unfortunately, fair or not, when it's best to connect with people. And that's just the nature of the beast. Before I joined Climate Central, one of the ways I wanted to try to connect this the most was melting ice and sea level rise. Because, you know, a lot of my people, the contrarian community, whatever you want to call them, were like, well, there's always been bad weather. We've always had warm spells. You're right, and you're right. So I'm not even going to worry about that. I'm not even going to worry about blathering on about this heat wave or how bad this storm was. Because I know with those people, I'm not going to make any headway. But if I go over here, and I say those people, I don't mean to be rude. One of my best friends in Houston, he's just not on board at all. Look at the ice that's melting. Look at the trends in the ice that is melting. All right, not the sea ice, because we know that's seasonal, but the glacier. Look at what's going on in Greenland. Look at the ice sheets in Antarctica. The poles are where the planet's going to be most vulnerable to warming. I don't care if you call it global warming, climate change. I don't care, because that's where the infrared processes dominate over the solar processes. Anyway, there's two ways you're going to have to measure. Two inputs to temperature. You got solar, incoming solar, and then the terrestrial infrared from the atmosphere, the greenhouse gases. All right. Well, if I'm at the poles, I don't have that much solar in the first place. So any increase in the terrestrial infrared, read the greenhouse gases, is going to play more of a role, which is exactly what we've seen at both the North Pole and the South Pole. Now, a lot of people like to get all up in arms, well, the Antarctic ice is up, da-da-da-da-da. And yeah, it's up. It's just the sea ice. But to compare Antarctica to the North Pole is just wrong, because Antarctica is this huge continent at the bottom of the world, surrounded by water. The North Pole is the opposite. It's a big ocean surrounded by land. And we all know that water is going to be warmer than land because you've got a bigger heat capacity. So that's why the North Pole is warmer in the first place. And because you have more cold at the South Pole, you have a stronger contrast between the cold at the South Pole and the mid-latitudes of the southern hemisphere. So you have a stronger contrast, so you have a stronger jet stream, so you have a stronger circumpolar Antarctic vortex. So it's going to be harder to mix any of that warm air southward toward the South Pole. You know, this is fairly basic stuff that people are walking away from because they don't want to get involved. You know, there's still people talking about the solar cycles. I'm like, well, look at the solar cycles. We've been in a minimum, and it hasn't gotten any cooler. You know, we've seen the last 2 years have been the warmest on record. And it's not just these people said it. You've got NOAA and NASA and Hadley and the Japanese agency and these folks at Berkeley, 5 different agencies running numbers and all coming to the same conclusion. You know, then you hear, oh, the satellites. Well, it's not one satellite. You got different satellites, and they're not really measuring temperature. They're measuring upwelling radiation from the Earth. And then there's also been proven that there's been drift in orbits, which makes the timing off. So maybe they're sampling at 5 o'clock when the satellite thinks it's 4 o'clock. So you've got orbital drift, and you've got to calibrate for that. So, and again, go with the good observation. And you'll also notice I'm not blathering on about the temperature in every single city because, yes, that's subject to the urban heat island effect. So I'm not going to be dancing all over that either. All right? But
that's
look
what
at
I
how
see the most is people. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, look at how plants are migrating. Look at how birds are migrating. Look at where stuff that has been around for decades is melting. Decades and decades. Yes, the 30s were hot in the U.S., but not everywhere. And I think that's the kind of thing that frustrates me. But again, the operational community, every time the weather's bad, they hear people yelling climate change, and they think that everybody's trying to draw an immediate correlation. That event was climate change. No, it's not what we're saying. Now, as you guys both know, there is an element that is pushing that, and that is more of an activist situation. You know, my organization, we don't do any lobbying. We're entirely science and journalism. We don't do any lobbying. We don't get involved in policy. We don't do any of that. We don't want any of it. We don't want any part of that. All right?
Good.
So going back to your question, I try to push the idea, you've got melting glaciers, you've got permafrost melting, your seas are coming up. And then I hear people, well, it used to be warmer, 10 million years ago. I'm like, well, we didn't have any cities on the coast 10 million years ago. You have all this infrastructure, not just here in the States, but, Shanghai. Oh my gosh, this just 2 or 3 feet up, and you've got just this huge mess. One of my favorite quotes, I heard this at an AMS conference in Raleigh last June about Houston, because Houston is so low. I forget who said it, but it said Houston is like Bangladesh with money in terms of the geography. I mean, it's just all swamp and low-lying. He said, but it's the same as Bangladesh. They just have money, and they built a boatload of oil stuff, all that petroleum, all the petrochemical stuff. So that's my rant.
I think it's interesting because when I say I'm of the James Spann camp, I don't like the hate that goes along with the climate change. I don't know. Once again, I'm at a loss for words.
Well, there's lots of hate on both sides, and that's the problem.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm trying to get to. Is there's so much divisiveness, and where my line of thinking comes in is that we need people like you, we need people like James on the other side of the table to get together and talk about it.
One of the things that there's a couple of very good people I think that can communicate this. One is Paul Douglas, who's up in Minneapolis.
Yeah.
He's run 6 or 7 businesses, and he's about as Republican as they come. But he's been called out as being, oh, well, you're not really Republican because you buy all this climate science stuff. And then you have somebody like Catherine Hayhoe, who is a climate science at Texas Tech, who is also an evangelical Christian, and she catches it all from the evangelical Christian community. Oh, you're you're not really a Christian. You like Al Gore, blah 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 blah. I'm like, so it's hard on them just as well. I mean, Catherine she gets, I mean, just horrible emails every single day she goes to work. I mean, just every day. I mean, she didn't sign up for that, you know?
I agree. There's the way I see it, we're weather professionals, we're weather nerds, we're people in general. Just because we think one way does not mean that we're not valid anymore. And that
Right.
needs to be taken away. Excuse me. If this issue is to be resolved in a scientific way, because I'm a firm believer in the scientific method, show your argument with facts, with data, with information, not hyperbole, not I'm going to strip your AMS certification or your NWA certification if you don't agree with me. That's not how this battle is fought. This fight is going to be with calm, apt-minded people who just want to figure it out for both sides and come up with a decision of how we're going to move forward with this, whatever this turns out to be. Move forward with it in a way where the public says, oh, okay, that makes sense.
Well, and
That's all we're wanting to do.
There's so much battle just to get people to acknowledge a problem. I mean, I know Mike Mann at Penn State. I've had good conversations with him, and he said, his problem is he just wants people to acknowledge it. How it's solved, he says, it doesn't matter how it's solved, whether it's free market or government. He says, I don't care. I just want it to be acknowledged. And he caught a lot of flack for some emails that were taken, quite frankly, out of context. I went through the entire email chain, and there's some stuff in there that's not real nice, but nothing that's malfeasance. And then he was thrust into the spotlight. Now he's kind of picked up the torch and doing his best to run with it. So the stakes are high because people think it's whatever the solution is, it's going to be a threat to their livelihood, it's going to be a threat to their way of life, and it's scary. It's really easy to scare somebody. It's a problem that you don't understand, and these people want to mess it up for you because they want to run your life. And that's really easy to sell to people. When it's really, I don't want to say it's not hard because it is a hard problem. Heidi Cullen, who I work with, she's like, it's the perfect problem. It's not sexy. It takes a long time. It's not something that's obvious. But one of the things for me is that look at what just happened in Flint. Look at what just happened in Flint. Everybody just, oh, this isn't a problem. This isn't a problem. This isn't a problem. This isn't a problem. Oh, that little leakage of that lead, that's really not that big. Oh, that little thing over there, that's not a big deal. And then bang, all these people are sick. So all that little glacier, that doesn't mean anything. Oh, that little bit, that doesn't mean anything. It's like, this isn't going to happen like the day after tomorrow. We're not all going to wake up in a week and the Atlantic has stopped circulating. It doesn't work that way. All right? To be honest, this is much more a problem for my kids in the other room and probably their kids, especially along the coast. I'm much more worried. If you want to know what I worry about the most, it's the cities, the coastal cities of the world, 80, 100, 120 years from now. That's what I'm really worried about the most. I mean, we're talking to our sea level rise folks at my office, and they've calculated there's about 6 feet of sea level rise kind of baked into the system. In other words, we still have, even if we stopped emitting CO2 now, there would still continue to be warming through the coming decades because we've emitted it so fast geologically. That's the other thing. We tell people, this is happening fast, this is happening fast, but the public's concept of fast is entirely different than the scientific concept of fast. When we say it's fast, we're like, oh my gosh, this is only going to happen in a couple of 100 years. Meanwhile, I'm going to be dead. This communication back and forth is just such a struggle.
I think that is the key to the whole thing is proper communication.
Absolutely.
Is getting the other person, regardless of their point of view, to understand specifically what you're meaning to say. And obviously that's not just a weather issue, that's a human issue. it's getting it's getting your verbal skills to a point where you can go up to any person and speak your mind, and they will understand precisely what you mean in the context that you mean it, and be able to either argue against it, for it, or say, "Hey, cool," you know.
Yeah, my friend Ed Piotrowski in Myrtle Beach, he's kind of on the fence. He's like, I want to learn more, but I don't want to talk about it. I'm really scared of the viewers. I'm in a red state. They're going to push back. And there's a whole bunch of that, too. And they don't have enough confidence in the material to talk about it without feeling like they're going to be shut down by their management or a viewer just like, well, I saw this. And you're like, oh, well, now I got to go look that up. Oh, yeah, well, I saw this. Well, now I got to go look this up. And a lot of them just don't want to, there's not a lot of gain in it for them professionally or personally. It's not that they don't care, but there's too much immediate risk to their livelihood. That's why somebody like Greg Fishel in Raleigh coming out and starting to talk about it is a huge amount of courage. It doesn't do him anything to talk about it. He could just sail through these next 8 or 10 years, retire, be done. Be done. Not have to talk about anything. He's in a red state in Central Carolina, and he's taken so much heat for speaking on this topic. So much heat for speaking on this topic. And I have a huge amount of respect for him for doing it and trying to do it in a civilized way. But even trying to do it in a civilized way, he's just nasty, nasty emails and tweets at him left and right. Just left and right. Oh, you're a sellout, da-da-da-da-da, you, whatever. And unfortunately, being in a social media age only makes that worse because everybody has this new courage because they're hiding behind a keyboard. Mm-hmm. And I told Greg, you know what you ought to do? You ought to do like, is it Jimmy Fallon does this? Oh, no, not Fallon. Kimmel. Kimmel will have people come on and read their mean tweets on the air.
Yeah.
So just read the mean tweets. Read all these people, what they say, because, oh, such and such said, hey, Greg, you're a whatever it is. I'm not going to get into some of the stuff. But that's funny, but at the same time, you see how mean people are. And that's lost. If you're going to put that out there in the interwebs, you got to be prepared to back it up. That's why, I've blocked people, but it's most of these people on Twitter where they tweet something to me and all I see is the big egg. I'm like, no,
haters, trolls, and know-it-alls.
I put my face there. That's my reputation. That's who I am. If I'm going to do a smart aleck thing, I got to be prepared to back it up. If you don't have the courage to put your face next to what you say, I don't have a lot of respect for you. I just don't. And that goes back to some of these, and going back to the weather stuff, all these amateur weather sites who, oh, I'm super duper mid-Atlantic weather or whatever they are, who won't put their faces next to their product. Well, we're an organization of blah, 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 blah. Put your face up there, man. Or woman, whoever it is. Show who you are and show that you're responsible for what you put out. Accept some responsibility.
I'm glad Sean said I'm an amateur person because the website we do is amateur, but
there's nothing wrong with amateur. I'm just saying you should be responsible for it. There's a lot of good amateurs and hobbyists.
Our faces are all on it, so they know who we are. There's a lot that don't.
That's all I'm saying. And I don't say amateurs like, oh, you're just an amateur. I mean somebody who doesn't do it as their general profession. There are a lot of good amateurs and hobbyists out there doing good, valuable work. I don't deny that for a minute. What I am saying, there's also an element, and you guys know this, they're just posting any piece of data they can to get likes and shares. And that's what kind of drives the rest of us crazy.
It's clickbait.
Although it's absolutely clickbait. But there's meteorologists. There are professionals who do that too for clickbait. So there's no easy solution to this, unfortunately.
From what I have been, since I didn't have to talk for like 20 minutes, I was so excited. But I think the problem that I've always have seen is that the public, when they talk, and you mentioned this about so-and-so storm or such and such tornado, and I know you mentioned this about the tornadoes that we had just this past couple of days, the without warning thing, which seems to be like, let's plop that up every time a tornado hits something somewhere in like a weird part of the year, and I'm thinking, I'm sorry, tornado season is January 1st to December 31st. Tornadoes can happen anywhere at any time, and as Matt and I know, we had tornadoes in Iowa 2 days before Christmas. It's rare. We don't get tornadoes 2 days before Christmas, but it happened. It just so happened that the atmosphere and the weather came together, and we had thunderstorms. We had tornadoes. Ooh, whoopee!
The issue there, and my friend Matt Lanza, who is also in Houston, he said, I don't think that the networks see it that way when they plop something up there without warning, because no one is prepared to lose their entire livelihood in 60 seconds. In other words, you're just kind of chilling out, and yeah, that might happen, and then your whole livelihood changes in 60 seconds. And you weren't really prepared for that. You weren't mentally prepared for that. Is that the same as warning? Not really. They like without warning. They like without warning because it's alliterative. It starts with W's because that's what TV likes.
I'm sorry, say that part again.
Alliterative. They both start with W, without warning.
Oh, okay. Okay.
You know, and they like catchy little headlines, catchphrases down going across the bottom of the screen there. They like that. It's a mnemonic device. People remember things more when it's alliterative. When they start with the same letter. It's just this communication stuff is so bizarre. But it is irresponsible to say without warning, because that is an implication that the meteorological community had no clue, which is patently false. And we all know that's patently false. You know, saying that, oh, surprise snow. No, it wasn't. Maybe you got one more inch. Maybe you got 6 instead of 4. You know, and those are the kinds of things for our community that has struggled a lot more in the past versus now to get the forecast right. And does so much better than it did 25 years ago. To still be pigeonholed into this by a media that does not understand science, doesn't care anything about understanding science. In fact, they don't want anybody to understand science because science still isn't cool enough to put on TV. That's going to change in time. You know, the Bill Nyes of the world, the Neil deGrasse Tysons of the world are making some headway. The other thing you remember, the people who watch nightly news, they're all old. I mean, you know, I maybe like 25 years old watching nightly news or any of the networks. I'm not picking on NBC. And old people don't like to change their ways. I mean, I'm getting older. I don't like to change my ways, but that's the way it is. And it's a very slow crawl from one mindset to the other. It doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen in a week. Sometimes it takes a generation. So I think in time we'll see that. I mean, like this. Who'd imagine doing this 10 years ago? Not me. Not me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, I was happy when I was a teenager to have a big old Apple IIe in my bedroom, much less this kind of stuff. 64K of RAM. Woohoo! You know, those were the days.
Okay, you say that. I'm gonna take that kind of a step further. My question to you is, you say that the media as a whole doesn't really care to like science or understand science the way that we do. Should they?
Should they? Well, it depends. The media now landscape is such that the main objective is to get eyeballs to the set. I mean, that really is the main objective. Get eyeballs to the set so you can sell advertising time. I mean, that's the objective. It's not like 30 years ago or 40 years ago there was more this altruistic, we're going to inform, da-da-da-da-da. That's just not there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, some people will say it was never entirely altruistic, but I don't have any need for it. And I think fewer and fewer people younger than me have any need for it because of this, what we're doing here. You can get information on demand instead of having to wait. You know, so most of your stories in the media now are very emotionally driven, highly charged, emotionally driven stories. Because once you get emotionally involved in the story, you want to stay with it. I mean, that's 101 of television news. Get an emotionally involved story, because then people are going to want to stay with it, and they'll keep coming back to the screen. And weather is emotional for everybody because everybody experiences it. Everybody has to deal with the weather. Everybody. It affects everybody, period, which is why that's the one thing that most people keep coming back to the news for, is our local weather folk. Especially the older set, they want somebody to walk them through that. They want a personal connection. They want somebody responsible. They want somebody who's going to help them through it. Instead of just, oh my gosh, Auntie, here comes a tornado kind of thing. They want somebody, and that's what James does, great. In Alabama, he does a fabulous job just holding people's hands through the storm. That's what Norcross did in 1992 with Andrew. He just walked people through it. He helped them through it, and that's what people are looking for from a weather aspect.
True.
But then with the weather, it's emotional, but then when you talk about climate and with the climate change, it's not that emotional tug, and you can't draw anything from that because it's, like you've said before, it's slow. It's not the 24/7, we need to know now, what is it going to be in like 2 weeks, when 2 weeks it could be like the same. It's not something that's exciting and thrilling and bright lights and whatnot.
Yeah, well, that's what I said before, is the opportunity, and this isn't necessarily fair, when there is high impact weather, that's when people are paying more attention, and that's when you want to convey the message that this might become more common in a globally warmer atmosphere. This storm might have been made stronger because we've got more energy in the system now. And that's what I said. It's a very difficult path to walk. We're trying to catch people while they're paying attention versus scare them unnecessarily. One of my biggest problems was that this really wasn't that much of a partisan issue until about 2005, when Gore put his movie out. And once he put the movie out, then anybody who was on the political right, oh, this is Gore's stuff. The liberals want to come in. They want to steal your coal. They don't want you to drive your car anymore. They want to make you change all your light bulbs. They want to run your life. And that's really not what it's about. But because Al Gore did it, I mean, for my money, and this is personally, that he's just the wrong messenger. He's just the wrong messenger. For my money, the best thing Al Gore could do was go away. Globally, he's had a big impact. I mean, we talk about climate change and people not really being convinced, da-da-da-da-da. This is really only a problem in the U.S. I mean, the rest of the globe kind of gets it. This is only a problem in the U.S. because we're quite stubborn. I mean, look at the system of measurement that we use. We're stubborn folks. We don't need to play nice with anybody else. We're stubborn.
I'll be honest, I didn't think of it like that until just now.
What's that?
I'll be honest, I didn't think of it like that until just now, and I've been overseas quite a few times, both with inside and outside the military. I'm a military veteran, not to toot my horn or anything.
Well, good. Thank you for your service, sir.
I appreciate that. I've seen a lot of the world because of that, and I never put two and two together. But now that you say that, I can already feel my brain kind of doing that already. So
what's that? What do you mean? I'm not following you.
Getting everybody else in the world kind of gets it already, and we don't, and that we're stubborn. And like you said, one of the best examples is the fact that we use a completely different unit of measure than the rest of the world. We haven't quite caught up to the rest of the world in terms of...
Because we don't need to. We're big and bad enough, we don't need to. And that's going to be the case for a while. We're very... Look, this is a great place to live. Don't misunderstand me at all. I love it. But we don't have to play nice with people because we're pretty strong. And we can pretty much do what we want to do. How long that goes on, I don't know. And I started talking about this geopolitics of India and China and Brazil and Russia. Then you start getting all that kind of stuff, which is beyond the scope of this course, as they say. But I do think part of the problem with climate change in the U.S. is a sociological problem, not socialism, but a sociological or attitude problem that is quite unique to the U.S., seconded only perhaps by Australia, because they were a penal colony to start off with.
Very true.
And and
Excuse me.
and with a problem like that, that's not going to go away, and you can't. It may take a generation just to get the attitude changed, and
And
whether for better or worse.
that's the thing. It takes, I don't mean this to sound crass, but it's going to take a certain amount of passing of generation and allowing a new generation to come on and accept something like this. One of the fathers of quantum mechanics, Max Planck, famously said, I don't want to mess this quote up, but he said something along the lines, a new idea doesn't gain acceptance because the people who didn't like it suddenly accept it. They said those people die off, and the people who were brought up with this new idea have always accepted it, and that is just the continuity of time in human existence. A lot of people thought, I say a lot, it's not like quantum mechanics was embraced just like that. It takes a while for things to go through the rigor of science and ultimately be accepted. It just takes time. And I think for this particular element of science, it's just taking longer because we're just a different lot here in the U.S. than the rest of the world, because we can be.
Now, I'd have to discuss about El Nino, which everybody wants to say it's the strongest El Nino at least recorded on record, and I believe it's starting to drop off now.
It's peaked.
It's already peaked. What I've been hearing, and this kind of is a bit, I wouldn't say scary, that I have heard that the El Nino is going to delve right into a very strong La Nina, which I don't think
can happen.
Which I've seen that, but the thing is, if we go from one right to the other real quick, especially if it could be a strong La Nina, what could that end up doing? Could we see even more crazy weather? I'm sure we'll see crazy weather even if it was neutral or not.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. There's always crazy weather. I always cringe at crazy weather. Extreme weather. The weather always sucks somewhere. It's a big planet, and the weather sucks somewhere.
Depends on what the word "sucks" means for somebody.
It's not good. It's not something you want to be outside in. It's not something you want to be outside in. So, again, those are the kinds of terms that get tossed around in a colloquial way that don't really mean a whole lot. I mean, I try to quantify things as much as possible to get everybody kind of on the same page. Like we said before, the term blizzard, that means one thing to the public, it means another thing to an operational meteorologist. There's a lot of terminology that they mean entirely different things to different people. And this is a communications issue. But back to what you said before with the El Nino, yeah, there is some history of sloshing back into a strong La Nina. And what that would probably mean in terms of a U.S. impact would be a more active hurricane season. Whether it sloshes back quickly enough remains to be seen. I don't think that's going to happen. Most of the operational guidance in that from the International Climate Research Institute, yeah, I mean, it's peak, and we're probably going to go into La Nina, but that's still 6 to 9 months out. We're not going to wake up April 1st and it's a La Nina. It's just doesn't happen that fast.
We hope not.
And the other thing is, not every El Nino is created equal. In fact, if you've looked at some of the operational charts, there's a big ridge is going to kick up all over the West Coast again, and then Southern California probably doesn't get any precip for a couple of weeks. And Southern California hasn't got that much out of this. In fact, some of the strongest El Ninos do have most of their precipitation signal in Northern California. Sierras have done pretty well, but the Sierras, in terms of snowpack, they're only doing about 110 to 120% of normal. They're not doing 2 and 3 times normal snowpack in this El Nino. They're doing a little better than normal. So it's not like California's going to come out of this in April and be in a good spot. They're not.
It's still going to be a disaster.
I mean, I still remember the first time I flew out to Vegas, and we're just flying over the desert. I'm like, who the hell would put a city out here? And you see, in the distance, you see this little bright light. I'm like, oh, that's Vegas, that teeny tiny light in all of this nothingness. And I'm thinking, where do they get the water from? Obviously you dam up the Colorado River, da-da-da-da-da. But you keep putting more and more people out there, and even there was no climate change at all, you're still stressing resources. So you stress the resources that you have with more people, and then if it does get drier, which is probably going to be the case, not definitely, but probably, you're really setting yourself up for just this huge, huge problem.
And then turn that city into America's playground.
I know. But look, I was out there once in 2003, had a grand time. Like to go back, but that is the epitome of a great place to visit. Would never want to live there.
I agree. I make it a point to go and drive out there. I'm a big driving fan. I think one of the best drives in America is get on 80, on I-80, take it west, get on Interstate 76 in western Nebraska, take that to Denver, hook up with I-70 in Denver, and take that through the mountains. Most beautiful drive you'll ever go through.
Yeah, the one thing that's on my bucket list, being an Easterner, I've not done a lot of driving in the West, not much at all. A little bit out in Oregon and Cali, but not a lot of driving in the West. A little bit Colorado, but not much. And that's something I really want to do. The kids are getting older, so maybe for too much.
I'll give you a teaser. There's a little stretch of Interstate 70 that goes through. It's I think 13 or 14 miles long. It's a place in western Colorado called Glenwood Canyon. And mind you, this is a 4-lane interstate highway, 70-mile-an-hour speed limit. It goes through the bottom of a 2,000-foot canyon.
Nice.
And it isn't like the Grand Canyon where it's really spread out and you can't really tell it's a canyon, but you can tell it's a really deep hole. This is sheer cliffs on both sides. And running right next to the interstate is the Colorado River.
So in other words, it's a flash flooding nightmare.
Yeah. But driving through that place, I made that drive the latest time back in October. I was driving out to California for a drag race. And I said it there, and I've said it probably 20 times. That is my favorite place on earth. I've been to a lot of places. That is my favorite place on earth.
Yeah, I still a lot more of Earth I want to see. Guys, I gotta cut out here in another couple of minutes. The family's waiting on dinner for me, and I'm already gone over time. But I want to give you guys another chance to ask me anything you want while you got me.
Well,
Yes, sir.
I'll ask about, do a short little 2-3 minute snippet about your time in the Roanoke Lynchburg market, and even if you want to describe go Penn State or whatnot, where you went to school.
Yes, I'm a Penn Stater. We did my undergrad there, stuck around, and did my grad work there. Got my master's in 1994. Worked about a year as a Beltway bandit, meaning I was a contractor for NASA at Goddard Space Flight Center, which sounds fabulous, but I was writing another primary investigator's code for him, which is actually rather boring. So after that, I got this buzz in my head that while I'm still young, I'd like to try television. Back then I was 25. I'm like, what the heck? So tried, and it worked out. Made it work for almost 20 years. Had some very good times. Learned a lot. Learned a lot. It's one of those experiences I'm so glad I had. I'm so glad I had the opportunity to do it and learn how it all works. You know, producing, directing, editing, writing, at the key, anchoring, just what goes into it all, and how sometimes it's amazing that the thing ever gets on at all. It really is. I can imagine what it's like in even smaller markets. But I met some great people, and the other good thing about doing it for as long as I did, you meet people, then they go on somewhere else, and they've got friends all over the country now. I'm kind of just dotted across the country. But I had my fair share of good snowstorms. I had a couple minor tornado outbreaks. Virginia doesn't get an awful lot of tornadoes, mercifully. We get a lot of heat. We had a couple of ice storms. Ice storms are the worst. They're just the worst. Because they take out a whole city. I mean, you're just paralyzed. You can't do anything.
I agree.
When you got snow, you can enjoy snow. You can't enjoy ice. There's nothing there. There's nothing there. But we get a lot of heat. You get the occasional landfalling hurricane, and you get a lot of flooding. I mean, we get a lot of small stream and river flooding. River flooding is not a massive problem, but you get a lot of small stream flooding. You get a lot of that kind of flash flooding stuff.
Would you say flooding's probably the biggest thing that you dealt with in your time out there?
Yeah, I'd say more consistently, most consistently. I mean, yeah, you're going to get the occasional big snow, and heat waves don't do anything for me. Hey, we're covering a heat wave. It's hot. Go to the mall or the movies. Every time there's a heat wave, the news is always, oh, we're going to this cooling center. Go buy a fan. Keep your pets cool. It's weird every time. Every time. It's just, I can recite the whole thing.
He loves heat. He loves heat tips.
Yeah. Heat tips. Don't go out in the heat. Next. It's like, what did the one? This is recently in Chicago. It was, it was like 5 below zero. There was reported in Chicago. This is only 2 or 3 weeks ago. The reporter's like out there doing her little stand-up, and the anchors are like, "Well, what do you have? What kind of tips do you have for everybody in this cold?" She looked at him and go, "Don't be stupid." She actually said that on television. I thought, wow, God bless her. Man, yeah, put on an extra layer. If you're cold, put on another layer. Don't go splashing around in the water when it's 35 degrees.
Unless you're doing the polar bear plunge,
which I don't get at all, man. Anybody wants to do that, good for them. I don't want any part of that. I don't want any part. I don't want to be in the water.
Cause.
I know it's a good cause, but I can do good causes another way.
This is true.
I can do some causes that don't give me hypothermia.
I think the thing is Sean has never been in the Midwest where it gets to 35 degrees and people wear shorts.
No, I've gone to the gym. I've walked out of here going to the gym. It's 35 degrees. I got shorts on.
Yeah, it's just I don't know what it is about here in the Midwest that just people just do that. It's winter time. It's 35. Get out the shorts. Get out the t-shirts.
I do it in protest.
Yeah,
I'm the world's biggest warm weather fan. Love my heat. Love my humidity. I will wear shorts in protest. Not very long, mind you. I will wear my shorts in protest outside when my limit's about 28, 29 degrees, and that's when it's changed.
All right, guys, I got to run. Thanks for having me on.
We'll let you go and eat your cold dinner.
Yep. Thanks for having me on. You guys have a good weekend.
Okay, you too. We may have you on again when something else happens.
All right, you know where to find me. Take care.
Okay, bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Appreciate it.
So that was Sean, who's disappeared from our screens. So we have a few other things we want to discuss, Matt, while we're on here.
Yes.
Because we had the snow this past week, which we discussed with Sean and whatnot, which dumped a lot of snow in northwest Iowa, but nothing here. The funny thing about it is, and for those that don't know, because I mentioned this before Matt came on, before we started airing that. Of course, we were supposed to have a show on last week, which, of course, what ended up happening is my father passed away a week ago Wednesday, which would have been the 27th of January. The funny thing is, and this how is it funny? Well, I'll mention this before I get to that. My father died on his birthday. So he was born and he died 74 years apart. It's kind of, But he was always on this thing. He always loved to get me on this with weather. He would say, "Oh, I suppose we'll be in the dry slot or whatnot." And what happened? What happened with this blizzard in our part of the state, in eastern Iowa? We got dry slotted. I'm like, oh, and he knew this storm was coming because I've been giving him updates, and the storm was like the weekend. This past the weekend we just passed, back the second or the 30th and 31st, or there was the 31st and 1st, or no, it's the 1st and 2nd. I'm so lost. It was the Monday night of my father's visitation, which was the caucus, and Groundhog Day.
Yep.
And I had told him this was coming a week ago, before he untimely passed on. And the dry slot came. We got a little tiny bit of snow, then we got dry slotted, and it changed the rain. It rained all day Tuesday.
Yep.
And then it snowed again late Tuesday night into Wednesday morning, and that was it. I thought, well, there's my present from my long passed away father, he gave me a dry slot so I didn't have to go and shovel 15 inches. So it's like, thank you. I don't have to shovel 15 inches. I only had to shovel an inch. And it was wet and gloppy.
You know, he's looking down and going, "You're welcome."
The bad thing about it is, and this is what I don't like, is that gloppy mess has now frozen into an ice block.
I know.
Where we had all that standing watery gloppy yuck is now ice, and it's all over the place. It is a mess, and I'm glad it's just on the grass, but I don't think the grass is going to be too keen on having an ice block on top of it. That's what I'm worried about, because I've been walking back to my truck and back over. I don't take the sidewalk, I go right over, because there's not much snow left. The few days before we had the snowstorm here, it warmed up into the low 40s, and all the snow started melting. And we now have, at least here where we are in eastern Iowa, there is less snow on the ground now than there was before the snowstorm came. So, at least here. Northern Iowa and western Iowa, they'll say, you're just a bunch of fools. Well, that's nice. You got the foot of snow, we didn't. We got rain. Would you like our rain? They would have been like happy for rain.
You don't have to shovel rain.
Yeah, well, except for the fact that a lot of the drains are blocked. We had that problem, at least up at my mom's house, that there's a lot of water that got stood around because they couldn't move. So that's now ice.
Oh, so all that ice is.
It's now ice now. But yeah, that's the problem I was worried about, because we had a lot of snow and then we have this glop. I'll just call this watery, goopy mess. I'll just call it glop. It was glop. And if it had to be anything, an inch of that is better than 15 inches of other stuff.
That's true.
But then we had when we mentioned this with Sean earlier about those tornadoes that were in the South again, and I watched this on Tuesday. Some of the coverage, I watched it from Matt Laubon at WTVA. I watched his coverage. He was a former Polygon guest. And Span from ABC 3340. There's like 60 channels he's on now down there. I can never remember which ones. And I watched his coverage, and he was also a former guest. And I was like, there's these storms, and they were trying to become tornadoes. And then there was this one storm that just wanted to tornado all the time. It must have had at least 5 or 6 tornadoes on it. And they showed pictures of them.
Is that the one that went through Aliceville?
Yeah, the one that went through Aliceville, Alabama. I saw the pictures of it. I assume you've probably seen the coverage or looked at it or whatnot, but that was kind of a little interesting. That storm that had the best rotation I've seen on a storm in a long time. At least, maybe except for maybe Rowlett, the Rowlett, Texas tornado, which will be next week's guest, by the way, with Ashton Altieri, whatever his name is. I'm trying to say his last name right, but I'll screw it up.
Send him an email and ask him how it's actually pronounced.
I actually looked online. Well, the interesting thing is, what I do typically when I try to do how guests pronounce their names, I either ask him, or I then go, for example, with Sean, I actually looked up old open news opens from his station in Roanoke, Lynchburg, and they said it as what they said it, and I said it that way, and he's like, close enough. So evidently they never said it right. Anyway, but the coverage.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
But the coverage of the tornadoes back on Tuesday was relatively good, given the fact that nobody bitched, nobody did much of anything. I know Span was not very happy about trying to cover up Wheel of Fortune, but
I think that was him trying to. I don't know. I think the way it felt to me, not that I have any credential to critique his or anybody's work, but the feeling I got was he was trying to kind of give it a preemptive strike.
Yeah.
Like, hey, I'm going to be interrupting your show later. Be mindful. Don't send me hate mail.
I think the lucky thing was most of the time he was on the air was during what would have been news. So they missed news. Whoopee. But yeah, those storms back on Tuesday, I was slightly surprised there weren't more tornadoes, but it is February. There are tornadoes in the south in February. I was a bit surprised some of the storms didn't spin up more tornadoes, even if they were just small EF1s or EF0s.
Well, I'll just say this. I have a hypothesis as to why that is. When I was watching some of James's coverage, and I didn't get a chance to watch much because I was getting ready for some stuff for this week, but what I saw of some of the radar loops and some of the satellite loops, and again, I didn't get to see a whole lot, so I didn't get the whole picture. But what it seemed to me was about the beginning third of the event, towards the end of that part of it, there seemed to be more showers and weak thunderstorms forming south of where all the action was.
Yes.
In Mississippi and stuff. I think that cut off, not totally, cut off the inflow just enough. I mean, just that little smidgen enough to cause them to not tornado as much, or cause some of those storms that would have tornadoed otherwise to not drop a tornado.
Yeah, Matt Lobhan mentioned that in his coverage, that you would see this one storm. This was a storm that did not produce a tornado. It was tornado warned, and it had a hook, it had rotation, but then what kept happening was showers and little weak thunderstorms kept building about where the inflow would have been. The rotation was still there, but it never could get balanced. He always used balanced. For it to be a tornado, for a storm to be able to produce a tornado, it has to have everything in the right spot. It never could get there. It had the rotation, there was the hook echo, there was a little inflow, but the inflow kept getting interrupted by other showers building up because the instability, even though there wasn't that much instability, it was enough that it was just developing everything like lickety split. Storms were just going up, they were just weak, but it was disrupting the bigger storms. It did that all day, except for the few that did produce tornadoes where there was no showers really interrupting it.
Yeah,
until it got further to the north, and then they got interrupted. So, but that's what happened back on Tuesday. I'm glad that there weren't many. There was a few. There was a few injuries, and then Wednesday, there's a couple tornadoes out near the coast, which is funny. For those that don't know, with the Weather Network that I am a co-owner of, Matt's not part of it. Although Matt may want to be, but we'll see. We'll see. Anyway, for those that would know, if anybody has been on the Weather Network way back when, we have a person, Colton, who's in the Army right now. He's at Fort Stewart. And I'm sure you know what happened in Fort Stewart, Georgia on Wednesday. They had a tornado. And he took video of it.
There's a couple of friends of mine that are stationed down there from when I was in basic training that got a hold of me because, of course, they knew I was a weather nerd. They're like, "Hey, we got a tornado down here." I'm like, "Yeah, I heard," and they sent me a couple of pictures. Nothing too spectacular, but
yeah, it was a small. It was an okay tornado. It did some damage, but it was funny because I was like, "Yeah, now he goes to the Army, and now he's getting tornadoes." It's like, "Yeah, okay, you can stay down there and get them, and we'll just stay up here and get snow."
Right.
But that was the first, I think it was Colton's first tornado he'd seen in several years because he's been in the Army almost probably at least over a year now.
What, is he down? Is he out of basic training then?
Yeah, he's already out of basic.
Okay.
He's been, I think he went to Europe for a time and then came back and whatnot, but he's still at Fort Stewart. He went back to Fort Stewart, so he's still there. That's where he's stationed.
Okay. That's a good post.
Yeah.
That's a good place to be.
I more or less, because and this is a little off topic, but I'll just go through with it. When Colton said when he was going to the army, I was like, well, you need to be based at any of these places, and I started listing some of the better ones, and Fort Stewart was, I think, one of them. And I said the other ones don't go there. If you end up being there, try and transfer yourself, because I don't think you want to be there. So he was lucky enough; he got sent to Georgia. And he thought, oh, I'm going to see hurricanes. He never saw those yet. Knock on wood, he may, unless he gets sent back to Europe. But
true.
He I think a couple months ago got on me saying, where's the hurricanes? I want to see one. I was like, sorry, I don't cover tropical weather. You're the tropical person because you're the closest. So
wait till the streak breaks.
Yeah, that's when I mentioned about La Nina. The first thing that came to mind was hurricanes, but there hasn't been one in so long. But speaking of that, update came out today, or came out. I think it was yesterday, about Hurricane Patricia in the Pacific last year, which happened during NWA when Henry and I were in Oklahoma City. That's when Patricia was getting itself together.
Yeah.
That, and I don't know if you'd seen this, Matt, or not. The update they did on it. Hurricane Patricia's top sustained winds were upped to 215 miles per hour at its peak. Its pressure was lowered to 872, which is still not the strongest on record. That's Typhoon Tip at 870. It is still the strongest in the Eastern Pacific and the Atlantic. Pretty much the strong. It was nasty. It made landfall as a Category 4, not 5. It was at 150 at landfall.
Okay.
But 872, 215. Hello. That sounds dangerous. I think that
just makes me think. How big was the eye wall on that storm?
God, it was not a very big eye wall. I think it was like 10, 15
10 miles.
It was tiny. I just remember it was like a pinhole, or maybe slightly bigger than a pinhole. And then the storm moved inland and died so quick as it got ripped up.
Think about it like this, and maybe this sounds like a lot of hype, but right, you have that storm, very small eye, very, very small, very concentrated eye wall.
Yeah.
And granted, I understand that maximum sustained winds aren't everywhere within the eye wall. It's in pockets.
It's just like in an area. But
this is still 215 miles an hour. That means that these winds that I'm about to describe are still in other places within the eye wall.
Yeah.
That's a 10 or 15 mile wide EF5 tornado.
Yeah. And luckily,
that's bad.
Luckily, when it was at 215, it was in the ocean. Even 150, when it made landfall, it's Category 4. It made landfall in an area that was fairly sparsely populated, but there were people. And the death toll was very low, especially for a Category 4.
Mercifully.
But given the fact it's breaking all these records everywhere, I think the name should be retired. Whether it does or not, we'll find out later this spring when they announce if they're going to retire the name or not. They retire Atlantic names left and right, but Eastern Pacific ones, they have to do something to cause trouble. But
didn't Typhoon Haiyan a couple years ago, did that name get
retired? Haiyan did. Yeah, they even in the Western Pacific, they're even more very lenient about wanting to get rid of names. I believe I'd have to go and look to see if Haiyan got retired. They very rarely do Western Pacific typhoon names, but I'd have to go back and look at that.
That, again, going on a tangent, but I remember seeing Haiyan before it made landfall, and I just thought that looked so bad, but so perfect at the same time.
Yeah, it was probably the most perfect storm when you look at it on satellites back then. And every storm that has been nasty since, they always compare it to Haiyan. And several of them are close.
I think rightfully so, because I think I saw a tweet from who was it? when that was going on, when Haiyan was going on. Don't quote me because I don't have it in front of me, obviously. But I think it was from Nate Johnson, maybe. I'm gonna have to go back and look to see specifically. But it said something to the effect of meteorological perfection. And
Yeah,
then
something
and then
like
there
that.
was and then there was a false color water vapor image of Haiyan.
Yeah. And typically, when you have perfection, that usually doesn't mean it's perfect weather. It means it's perfectly a nasty storm.
Mm-hmm.
And not all storms are nice
Precisely.
and perfectly symmetrical like Haiyan was a
Yep.
couple of years ago.
I think that's what it was. It was just so perfectly made, like built.
Yeah,
Everything
unlike
was there where it was supposed to be.
unlike Patricia, which was I think the miles per hour on Patricia were stronger than Haiyan, but Patricia, it just went from nothing to big storm to nothing in about a 6-day period.
Mm-hmm.
Haiyan, it had to build itself up over days and days and days, and Patricia, it's like whoosh, and it's like a flash in the pan type
Mm-hmm.
storm, and it was fairly decent size, but it was so small. If you were from the center of Patricia at landfall, where it was 150, you go 40 miles down the coast, only 40, and you may barely have gotten hurricane force gusts. You would have had tropical storm force winds easily, but tropical hurricane force winds, doubtful, because it was so concentrated and so small.
Mm-hmm.
The whole storm was fairly good size, but a lot of the wind was concentrated.
Right.
So that's why it
Reminded
was
me
not as bad of a storm Patricia was.
that part reminded me of Andrew.
Yeah, Andrew was another one where the eye was at Homestead, but you go to Miami and they had hurricane force winds. You go up maybe just north of Miami into the northern suburbs, closer toward Fort Lauderdale. Well, in fact, not even Fort Lauderdale is too far north. But you go, say, to where the airport is, Miami International's north of downtown quite a ways. They, I don't think, had hurricane force winds there. You go up to Fort Lauderdale, I think they had tropical storm force winds. West Palm Beach, further north, I don't think they even had gusts to tropical storm force. And you're talking 60, 70, 80 miles.
Yep.
And you go maybe a few miles further north, maybe toward Fort Pierce, they had no clouds. Because the storm Andrew was tiny.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say very tiny. It was good size, but it was not big. Too many people, for example, like Katrina. Katrina takes up the whole Gulf of Mexico, or at least 2/3 of it. Andrew, when it got into the Gulf, it got bigger. But when it was going through Miami or south of Miami, it was fairly small, maybe a bit bigger than what Patricia was.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I'd want to compare a Category 5 landfalling Atlantic storm to a Category 4 Eastern Pacific landfalling storm, 20-some years plus years apart. But
right. It's just funny
outside of
to it's funny to look and compare and contrast different storms and how they behave, though. I think there's something to be learned from that, to a point.
yeah,
Maybe. I'm just thinking out loud. I do that a lot.
yeah, I'm trying to think what else went down this week, because there was a lot of stuff that happened this week. Because I know the Patricia thing came up, and I saw that, and I'm thinking 215. Good grief! They don't even drive that fast in NASCAR at 215.
They do in my favorite sport, and much faster.
Yeah, drag racing, they will go up that high. But just think that's in a straight line. Just try to do that in a circle really fast. 215.
You can't.
Yeah.
You can't.
Yeah, not that way. Now let me see if I can get the satellite image to pop up so we can look at this. But I mean, you look at the weather right now, boring. I mean, there's the storm moving off the East Coast that brought the snow. Boston had no school today for this little thing.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, okay, this little disturbance is coming through right now in the middle part of the country, producing absolutely blah. New storm coming into the west. You see the kind of the flow up in Canada where the clouds are kind of diving back down. That's indicating that this next storm that you see the clouds over Alberta, which are actually the you see all these clouds blowing up in Alberta. That's more or less the clouds flying off to the top of the Rockies.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not as bad as it looks, but our next storm is going to be coming from that direction, from the northwest, Sunday into Monday, and that's why they've issued a blizzard warning. Oopsie. Come on. No, I don't want to go to that. And that's why if it pops up, see if it'll pop up, that they have right now a blizzard watch in effect up here from northern Iowa up into the Dakotas.
Yep.
And a lot of wind even in Montana. So this is going to be a fairly big wind event. But outside of that, the weather is very boring. Nothing going on much of anywhere else. A lot of the stuff's off the East Coast and moving away. Temperatures are, unfortunately, it's going to get cold again for a few days, for a day or two next week. But it's winter. It's going to get cold.
Yep.
I'm waiting for March.
That's what I want to come. I want my warm weather back.
I am worried, though, about the lack of snow, at least in this part of the state, though, for groundwater. Because the agriculture, I'm sure we had a lot of moisture last fall. And this winter has been It's been meh weather this winter with a couple of decent snows. At least in northern Iowa. Northern Iowa's just been pelted with snow, which is good for them because they've always seemingly get dry too quick.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just worried that there's not going to be a lot of moisture left for spring.
I think all the snow in northern Iowa is good for them and good for us as well, because whatever runs off from there will obviously come down here, which will help river levels, help water tables, and that's the real story is the water tables. The water tables are what determine soil moisture content, and the higher the water tables, the higher that soil moisture content is, and blah 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 blah. But I think I don't want to sound nihilistic, but our saving grace for next spring was the rain that we got in the fall. I think that put enough moisture in the ground before the first freeze, where I think we'll be okay.
Yeah. I'm just hoping that we just have a decent spring, but you never know. The thing I worry about is if it warms up like 2012 did when we had a drought year and it warmed up real fast. But
that's true. That was brutal.
Yeah, other than that, because there's not much else going on weather-wise. I will mention this because for those that would want to know, the NWA annual meeting this coming year in Norfolk, Virginia, they do have the hotel block up now for those that would want to attend. So you can go to the NWA's website at www.nwas.org and go to the 2016 meeting I think it's on the left side of the page, and you can then get to the block where you want to, if you want to go in and attend the meeting. You can't sign up and register for the meeting yet. That'll probably be in about a month or so. So for those that would want to do that, and I'm mad because the hotel rates are way cheaper than they were when I went to Oklahoma City.
Really?
I won't make a mention, but I'll just say this. With the hotel plus tax per night in Oklahoma City was about $160. In Norfolk, it'll be about $100.
Wow. My wife has some friends in Norfolk. I might have to try and cajole her into us taking a trip out there.
It's in September. So
September?
Yeah.
You
have to be an NWA. You have to be an NWA member to get a better discount if you want to go.
By then.
Yeah. I'm going to have to. This month is when my membership expires, so I'm going to renew it. So
I am not a member of a professional association, which that's one more thing I need to get on this year.
NWA's membership is $60 a year.
I think you're right.
I believe so, because I'm going to have to do that. Which is, it's a good deal, given the fact then you get your member, your. It also would mean too, Matt, if you went to the thing in Ankeny, you would get a discount if you were an NWA member to that too.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that. Other than that, don't think there's anything else. The minute I press stop broadcast, I'll remember 20 things. So I'm going to try to remember. I'm going to try to remember something. I know Ashton Terry, what's his face is going to be on next Saturday. That'll be the 13th, which is a good thing. He's on Saturday because I found out that next Thursday and Friday I'm not going to be here. Well, at night I won't be here for starting broadcast this early, but
that's Saturday. I think next week Saturday would work better, anyways. If that's what you said. Sorry.
Yeah, that was when he scheduled it. So
yeah, I think that'll work better for me, anyways, because I'm busy. I'm busy this last week that we're finishing up. The next week are going to be pretty busy. So
yeah, and the weather's going to get better because concrete and pouring and whatnot. It'll get better. Monday, I think you'll be pretty much like cleaning parking lots, probably with all the snow.
Maybe we'll see. Not sure. But with the cold coming in, we probably won't be going in the middle of the week because that's just too cold.
Yeah, Tuesday, Wednesday, I think you're not doing anything.
You can't manage the temperature that effectively, and the ability just isn't there. If you pour in those kinds of temperatures, once that top layer sets up and just starts to get hard in those colder temperatures, next spring and next summer you'll start to see the top layers kind of flake off in real flat pieces. Whenever you see that, that's what happened. They poured in the winter and they didn't warm it up. You'll see the top layer kind of flake off in real flat pieces, and then you have to come back in and completely replace the whole
because even if you patch it, it's a mess. It never will be right. Yep. I think that happened, I think, on the sidewalks here when they built this building many years ago. They did that, and it kind of flaked off in corners if they didn't do it right, and it kind of looked really shoddy or something. But
usually if it's corners, it's something else. It's usually an issue with the form that they used or something, or the ground wasn't graded just right. What's weird is that you'll see these flakes when it's too cold. You'll see them right in the middle, right in the middle in between cut lines and stuff like that, which are those lines that you see that you try to avoid to keep from breaking your mother's back.
Yeah.
It'll be right in the middle of those, completely away from any other joints or anything like that. It'll just start flaking off, It'll just start coming off, and the only thing that causes that with concrete is extreme cold.
Yeah. And that's what makes it hard when it's wintertime and you're supposed to be doing this, but there's just a certain time when it's too cold, can't do it anymore.
Yep.
And it's probably, 15, 20?
Ish.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I think Tuesday especially is not going to be warm.
Yeah, Tuesdays. Don't quote me because I haven't heard my boss say anything, but I've pretty much already in my own mind kind of discounted Tuesday, probably Wednesday as well. We'll see. In terms of pouring, that is. We could be there setting stuff up for other things moving on, but who knows? We'll see about that.
Yeah, so that's what's going on with Matt. He's going to be pouring concrete flakes everywhere. And Ashton will be on Saturday. After that, we'll see what we're going to do, because I'm going to try and get some other people on. I'm just, with everything that's been going on the last couple of weeks and the computer not wanting to work today, earlier, which drove me absolutely nuts. So, and I mentioned that to Sean before you came in here, Matt, and this is somewhat weather related, I might add, for those that would want to know this. My computer, I turned my laptop on. This is what I'm on right now. The computer would not turn on. It would not start. The screen would be black and wouldn't do anything. And I'm freaking out. And then I took it to my mother's house so that I could call Dell, because it's a Dell computer, from there, because for another reason I had to go over there because my mother and because my father had died like over a week ago, so I wanted to make sure she was okay.
Right.
And whatnot. She wasn't home because she had gone to another funeral of another person that I knew of but didn't know personally, but I knew who the person was.
Okay.
But anyway, so she came home within a half an hour. We called Dell, and they said, and I quote, "Oh, it was an Indian guy because it's, of course, India. I'm not going to do it in Raj from Big Bang Theory thing, but it's static electricity. We have to get rid of it. So you have to get rid of it by taking the battery out, unplugging the computer, press the power button 15 to 20 seconds, and then it's all gone." I did that, plugged everything back in, computer works. Static electricity. What does that cause from? Dry air, which I have because I don't have a humidifier in my apartment.
Wow.
Static electricity from pretty much dry air in an apartment.
Wow.
So I have never had this happen with any other computer, and it happens with this one. But while I was on the phone, I got them to give me my battery. So that's in the mail, and it's coming to me because that was another reason I wanted to call them too. So that got me to do it quicker. But
Cool.
Static electricity. So that's something that I'd be aware of for those that would have laptops and whatnot, that static electricity will ruin your computer. So, but so I was about ready.
The more you know.
That after I got the computer, if I had not gotten the computer fixed, I would have probably had to cancel this episode or postpone it again. But luckily enough, that got fixed, thank goodness.
Good.
So we will do next Saturday, which will be the 13th. That will be at 7 p.m. our time, Central Time, 8 p.m. Eastern. We'll probably start it a little bit earlier than that so we can chat and gab and do whatnot, and make fun of Ashton and his various episodes of tomfoolery. For those that don't know, if all you'd have to do is go and look up a clip of Ashton Altieri when he was in Denver and said Hooters instead of Hoosiers. There's a clip. That was Ashton.
I'm going to let you pick on him for that, not me.
Yes, he is a Busby flock member. For those that wouldn't know, Brian Busby was on back in December, and Busby still owes me barbecue in Kansas City.
Nice.
He was not drunk. I did email him. He was not drunk, and for when he did that, so I may do an episode in Kansas City with him
Live remote.
Yeah. The only time I've done remotes is Oklahoma City, and I did it one time you'd have to go back, I think it's episode 70 something or other. I did it on the chair with the camera on, the camera pointing out the window with the Oklahoma State Capitol building in the background. Because our hotel room faced northeast. So
cool.
And we were on the 11th floor of a 14-story hotel.
So you got the good view.
No, we paid money to get a better room. Our room was a quote suite.
Oh, I gotcha.
Because Henry wanted a suite. So we got a room. We had a room and then 2 bathrooms and a bedroom separate. So I was in the quote living room, which actually had a balcony that goes outside.
Wow.
So
you don't see those very often in hotels anymore.
Yeah. All you got to do, look up Renaissance in Oklahoma City. That's the hotel we stayed in.
Okay.
Nicest hotel I ever stayed in. Oh, except for the fact that I took pictures or I didn't take enough pictures. I still am mad that I was in an elevator with Spencer Denton, who's at WMC in Memphis, where I emailed and he never responded to me. And I saw several other weather people who I won't mention. I saw several former Polygon guests there. Dave Nussbaum, who's in New Orleans, was former Polygon guest. Gosh, who else was there? I'm trying to think. There was a bunch of other people there. I know Tom was there, who's in South Bend. He was there. What's his face that I can't remember his name now? Was over there. There's a bunch of them down over there, and I knew them all by heart. The thing that really makes me mad was when Henry, who didn't tell me this that he had gone somewhere and come back up the elevator. He was in the elevator with Jim Cantori. He didn't tell me this until like 3 weeks after the fact, and I was like, "You bitch." But anyway, and Cantori was the first weather person I saw when we drove into Oklahoma City. He was standing in a corner, waiting to cross the street, and I was like, "Jim Cantori!" And Henry's like, "Who cares?" I was like, "I am the weather person." So anyway,
that guy is buff.
That, but for those that would want to go to Norfolk, and I mentioned that like 20 minutes ago, it's up there for those that would want to know. It's at the Waterside Marriott something or other or something. I'm trying to, or is it the Waterside Sheridan? No, it's the Marriott. No, it's on a street. All I know, it's near Schlotsky's Deli. It's near Schlotsky's. Yes, I know near Schlotsky's.
I remember Schlotsky's.
You've never had it or have?
I have. I remember it well.
Oh, that means
there was a time when I was in the military where the base where I went to basic training, Fort Sill, they had a Schlotsky's Deli on base. In fact, the first junk food I had after basic training was Schlotsky's because the Burger King next to it was closed. Yep.
Oh dear, we're gonna regret Schlotsky's.
Yeah.
I'm mad that there's no Schlotsky's here, but anyway, there's too many other delis anyway. So
speaking of food, my wife wants me to cook dinner, so I'm gonna go cook her some.
We're gonna get off. So thanks everybody for joining us. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Bye.